Oppenheimer, more like Oscarheimer. Yeah, we're going to keep it. We're going to keep that opening. Okay, first of all, I want to go over this because it's the first review I've done since the SAG strike, and I've done quite a few since the writer's strike. First of all, I'm not SAG, I'm not WGA, none of that stuff. I don't get paid by studios to do reviews. I wouldn't listen to anybody if they do. Those reviews probably aren't very good. I think there's been a little bit of confusion over what people are allowed to do as people who don't want to break the strike or anything like that, and what people should do. I'm here to say this. First of all, I completely support the writers, the actors that are striking. So far, every demand or every bit of negotiation that I've seen on the writers and actors side is super reasonable, and everything that the studio has been doing has been cartoonishly evil. So I don't think it's a tough one when you look at all the issues to actually figure out where it should stand. But in this case, fully supportive. And I was curious, because there's originally a little bit of discourse, and there was some information online that wasn't incredibly clear. And I've come to the conclusion that doing reviews and doing commentary and things like that is fine. I've looked for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because that's what SAG said. They said it's fine. As long as you aren't working for the studios, getting paid by the studios, you're good. Especially if you are not SAG or WGA. And, it's a strike. It is a collective action. It's a group thing. So I will definitely, if that's what they say, I'm on their side. If things change, if there is some sort of boycott or some other level that this goes to, and that changes the way that we as influencers interact with media, journalists interact with media, stuff like that, that's another conversation we'll have at another time. But for now, I just want to say fully support writers and actors. Hope they get paid. Hope everybody that works on this get paid. A lot of writers, not that many writers actually, a lot of actors in this movie, a lot of actors who you watch the movie and you go, isn't that the guy from that thing? So let's talk about Oppenheimer. Movie's fantastic. It's great. It's going to win a lot of awards. I think it is, prisoner of the moment, me. I think it's probably Christopher Nolan's best movie. And I think it is both the least Christopher Nolan movie, right? It doesn't feel like Batman Begins in terms of it's not that same kind of movie. It's not the same kind of movie as Inception. But on the other side of that coin, it does feel like a Christopher Nolan movie. It has the hallmarks of a good Christopher Nolan movie. The color, the dialogue, the editing, the framing, all the lines that characters say that exist only to set up a cool line at the end of a scene. That's a thing Christopher Nolan, a lot of people do it, but Christopher Nolan does it more than any other writer, director I can think of, where if you know what I mean, right? It's the thing where someone will say, I had it for breakfast this morning. And then someone else will say, what did you have for breakfast? And then that other guy will pause and say, everything. And then the scene ends like that. I think those are great. And I love it. I love all the wit. I love all they doesn't really even feel like overwritten characters, but I love how every character is immensely clever in every moment. It makes sense here more than, say, in Batman. Because in these moments, these are the smartest people on Earth talking about the annihilation of the planet. So, you figure they're going to choose their words pretty carefully. These guys have been building a bomb all their, for so much of their lives and thinking about it. And the bomb's going to go off. And then they're going to say something very profound. They're not just going to go, wowee, what a bomb that was. They could, but they... actually, you know what? A couple of them do. But for the most part, it's a very, some of these characters feel somewhat poetic. So I'm going to say, big picture, the movie is quite good. It is very, very good. I think it is worth seeing for pretty much everybody. There is some nudity, a little bit, nothing crazy. It's a little awkward to see with a 14-year-old, your 14-year-old son or whatever. It's going to be a little weird for a second. But more or less, I think this movie is great. And I think it's very mature. It's a serious movie, but it's incredibly engaging. It's 3 hours long, which I usually hate. And, even here, there were some points where I was like, we just did the most interesting thing ever, and we're not done. And I like what we're doing here, but this almost feels like we're watching a different movie, and it's not quite able to maintain the energy level of that other movie. I will say, the end is more interesting than the beginning, and the middle is more interesting than the end. So that's kind of what you're dealing with this movie. I'm having somewhat of a dilemma here. talking about the themes and stuff like that is almost spoiling it. Because for this whole movie, you're watching it and you're seeing these conversations happen and you're seeing these characters talk about, the bomb and the war and science and philosophy and everything. And you're kind of going, what is this movie trying to say? Because this is not an Adam McKay, like, Don't Look Up, where from minute one, you're like, they don't want the climate change to happen. And this is like very nuanced, and you really do see every side of it. You see a lot of different characters that are very, they feel differently throughout the movie. So I don't want to say what the vibe of the movie is, because I do think that somewhat spoils kind of what the feeling of it is, what you're supposed to feel. Because I do think the movie does have a point of view about this. So I will say, if you want to go in knowing nothing, it's a great movie. It's very good. I saw it in IMAX. The IMAX is fantastic. It's a big, exciting, loud, like, visual movie. I think it's worth pretty much everybody watching. Okay, so spoiler thingy over. Spoiler veil lifted. It is scary. Like, from the minute that the thing happens, the mood is quite tense. And the way that is manifested is in both just the literal, like, what happened and how that affects everything, the mechanisms behind it. Scary. Also, the way that Robert Oppenheimer internalizes this and how this affects him and how this affects everybody around him. It's pretty scary. And like, it's like, I just don't know how to explain it besides just like watch it and you'll know exactly what I mean. But like, I've not been that tense in a movie for a while, especially sitting next to complete strangers, and just like, I could feel the electricity kind of in the audience. I think it is so part of what I think is a little tricky about the pacing is it is very much a movie about a guy that did one really interesting thing. He did a lot of interesting things, but there was that one that was the big one. And that happens in the movie, and yet the movie continues, because it's not just about that. It's about how that changed his life and how that changed the world. And it's kind of got this interesting little meta-narrative where it is already, talking about some of the consequences of that, and there's certain bits that play out. Like, it's very Nolan, it's very Memento, very Inception, where we're on different levels of this story. I think, like, Cillian Murphy obviously is fantastic. He's very good. The other actors I think people have strong feelings about. Emily Blunt is good. She's not in the movie as much as you'd expect, although, she's not in the room building the atom bomb with him, so, like, that's a lot of the scenes. I do think she has kind of a let's say, meatier role than Florence Pugh, who is the other kind of love interest character in this movie. And I only mean to kind of bring them both up because I had heard them kind of both said, like, they're kind of both the lead actor here. It's way more Emily Blunt, and to the point where, like, there's one scene specifically of hers that you're watching and you're like, oh, that's what they're going to show during the Oscar nomination little reel. That's what they're going to go over. So, like, I would say that the lead is Cillian Murphy. The second lead kind of is Robert Downey Jr., which I found very surprising. There's a lot of him in this movie, and he's good. He's a good actor. He's good in the parts he's good in, and it's a complicated character. I think, I don't want to go into too much detail about it because I didn't know anything about this guy going into it. Fascinating. And then I would say it's like Florence Pugh, Emily Blunt. It really is like an ensemble piece. There are so many actors constantly walking in and out of things, and you go, oh, that's that guy. Oh, that's that guy. Oh, that's the guy from Chronicle, Dane DeHaan. There he is. And that's the guy from Stranger Things, the scientist from that. He's that guy. And just constantly, I'd say that's the point of it. Is it feels like a movie where you're watching this big, humongous production take place. Oh, and then Matt Damon's in it too. Matt Damon's good. He's fine. He's got what I would consider a very Nolan-y character, kind of the same energy as maybe like. Not quite like Tom Hardy in Inception, but he's that role where he's not a main character. He's there to do a very important thing and, say a kind of silly line every so often. Make a little joke. Make a little kind of dry humor, that wit that Christopher Nolan is so well known for. The production design of the movie is pretty incredible. I'm very interested in seeing all the behind the scenes stuff. And yeah, the feeling that this movie creates is very strong. And it's very clear. Not necessarily this movie, like I said, it's not Don't Look Up. The movie is not trying to come and have a character sit down and tell you it's bad if you do climate change. And everybody who doesn't do climate change is an idiot. This movie paints a very complicated picture of why a lot of different people were thinking this was or was not a good idea. Also, really in the beginning gets into union stuff, which I thought was a real treat. Can't blame that, obviously, but like there's a lot of beginning stuff where bad guys are like, don't do a union, John Oppenheimer, and he's like, okay, I might. I appreciated that. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean, like just thinking back, I'm like, oh right, Josh Hartnett was very good in this. A lot of his there were plenty of actors who I don't quite recognize, but were also put in very good performances. It's a great movie. It's really, really good. Is it my favorite Christopher Nolan movie? I really like Batman Begins, and I really, really like The Prestige. And Prestige is so much fun. But this movie also has one other hallmark of a Nolan movie that I don't know if I quite love here. I think in general, this is like a 9 out of 10. Like, wow. It's so well put together. It's so complex. And it's got so many really excellent performances. I will say, and I kind of got at this a little bit, where like it's sexy, but not like sexy. It is very, like this would be, you know, people get mad if this was in the Captain America movie, but for like a biopic about like some guy from the 40s who has sex once or twice, like it's not that bad. It's pretty tame. Some of the imagery is honestly a little silly. There's one scene relatively early, the sexy scene. I don't want to say that I think parts of this movie feel like watching Solo, where at the end of a scene, a character will say like, I like this land. This is a beautiful desert. What did you say you called this place again? And then Oppenheimer will look and say Los Alamos. And then you'll go, oh, right. This is where they're going to do Oppenheimer stuff later. Like there's a lot of like, we spend a lot of time looking at things that in other contexts wouldn't really matter, but because of their significance later, you know what that's like an important thing. Or even knowing just like historical information, you're like, oh, the fact that, you know, they brought up that senator is like, yeah, that's like you'll see it you'll know when you see it. So it's not a ton of that stuff. There's a little bit of it in the beginning. One of the sexy scenes has that, and truly like constructs a scene that I think would make sense if like it was the Oppenheimer movie that Jenna Maroney did over the break between seasons of TGS, and we just saw like a clip of it, because it is so much, and I love it. I appreciate it. Christopher Nolan, you're great. I had a blast. Fantastic movie. I remember going into this thinking like, well, it's Christopher Nolan. He's the guy who did the movie about Batman fighting secret Occupy Wall Street guys, or Batman using, you know, Patriot Act surveillance to beat the Joker, or Batman extraditing some guy from China just because he wants to. So like the politics of Nolan are interesting, which I don't think is a huge problem in the Batman movies or anything like that. But I think in a movie that is so inherently political and has so much to say, like I think that was all balanced incredibly well. And I've left the movie being entertained, informed, and terrified. So if that is what you're into, this movie will meet those expectations. And I think it was quite a trip. So I don't know. I keep saying I don't give number ratings, but I have given them every time. So let's say this is a 9 out of 10. It's really, really good. I would say seeing it in IMAX is worth it. And also, I will say again, support the striking writers and actors. I think it's a baller move when the actors at the premiere for this movie all left when the strike started. Like that was cool. And I appreciate that. And I think it's obviously very important. And at the same time, this piece of art that they made is quite good. Very impressed with it. And yeah, I think it's a movie I'm going to be thinking about for a while.